bring from our sages, in the Midrash, that that to walk in our statutes means to toil in Torah. So that's the first. That's the opening, the entrance to all blessing, and all the rest of the blessings that come after that is that toil in Torah, and to keep the commandments, etc., and to follow in God's ways and other things that it discusses there. It's even more acute is when, and sticks in my mind very, very much, is the curses. The first one is to abandon Torah study. And then the person despises people who study Torah. He also abandons Torah observance. Then he despises people who study Torah, despises people who keep the commandments. And then he despises Torah scholars. And then he denies the heavenly origin of the commandments. And then finally, he's completely denies the existence of the Creator. So he goes from worse to worse, but it begins with abandoning Torah study. So we see the importance of Torah study. I mean, I don't think everyone understands this. So the topic for tonight is interrelated to this. You know, it's just an amazing thing how you're always on the precipice as a human being. You're in between being a high priest because a Noahide who occupies themselves with Torah is and toils in Torah comes to the level of a high priest, right? As famously Rabbi Meir says, and I always like to quote, so important to remember. And the meaning of that statement clearly means to say that Ben Noah, through his Torah study, brings down a level of divine presence, similarly to a high priest. You know, there's many ways that you'd have to examine what's the meaning of the statement. Clearly, it's trying to tell Ben Noah that you become of a high level of spiritual stature by occupying yourself with Torah. Clearly, that's the point it's making. But if we look a little deeper, what is it that the high priest does? The high priest is he's the chief priest in the temple, which is the resting place for God. He's basically the supervisor of that place. He also is the one who goes into the Holy of Holies, and meets with the divine presence there. So I think there's clearly that element of bringing down the divine presence through Torah study. I mean, you know, you can go on and on about it, and we'll get more into this actually in a moment about it. As I was, to get back to the topic the profound point of a person being on a precipice, meaning to that is what I was saying is that a person, by their decisions and choices, and by, a person can turn to Torah study, or a person could turn to promiscuity, for example. A person hangs on the precipice. Most people, it's just the choices they make. You can go to the highest heights or the lowest of pits in just some decisions that we make. And it's a little scary. But obviously it's in our hands, and we have the ability to choose to go higher, and to choose to be close to God, and to choose to follow that path. Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is because what we're up to in our book of universal laws is we were in the middle of the study of sexual prohibitions, and yet at the same time we're in the middle of discussion of the importance of Torah study. And what's so amazing is how connected these two topics are, because they're really they really are juxtaposed, against each other, really polar opposites, in other words, is what I mean. And one is the dominance of a divine intellect, and the other is, the dominance of the person's most basis tendencies. And when a person studies Torah, so the divine soul and the divine aspect of the mind, or what the mind can perceive of divine will, dominates the person. And through sexual prohibitions, the passions of the person dominates the person. So a person can go from one thing really to the other thing. And obviously one brings, a settlement of the world by making a person a really free chooser in order to be a godly agent, and that their brain through, basically a Torah, a GPS, is able to, well, basically my point is this: through Torah study, a person becomes free, our sages say. There's no person who's truly free except one who occupies themselves with Torah. And I think, one of the meanings is that a person who doesn't study Torah is controlled by their passions. A person can't really be in control of their, whatever their negative tendencies might be. Some people have different type of passions, whether it's greed, anger, whether it's, whether, again, it's sexually related, whether it's other indulgences, whether it's honor, whether it's jealousy. But there are many different predilections that a person has. And without studying Torah, a person really can't get them in control just by their own force of will. It's not possible. And so it's really the Torah that creates this holy intellect that gives the person the ability to really be free and to really be able to control these negative and destructive tendencies that they have, and instead to put them in their proper place and to put them in their proper perspective. Today's chapter in Maimonides that is being studied as a community across the world is in the book of Mada. Maimonides, book of Mada. That's just to explain, it's also something called Mishnah Torah. It's an important book, and I recommend it for all those who haven't studied it. On top of your other studies, as you're going through the scripture and so on. But the book of Mada has the fundamentals. He himself says that we start with the laws of the fundamentals of Torah, and he goes on. And there's something there that's called again, for those of you who are already aware of this, then I apologize if it's for those of you who are not. There's something called Hilchot Deot, which is the laws of really, I guess, kind of like how do I say Deot? It's really opinions, mental states. But the point is, it's the laws regarding personality, in which he discusses the right way to behave. And famously, as you all know, the golden mean is somewhere in the middle. He says a person should be moderate, not to any extreme. So in other words, it's a chapter discussing character. And so therefore, this is related to the Noahide community. It's clearly rational. It has to do with following God's ways, and relevant to every single human being. That question obviously goes to the civilizing of the world, to be a decent person in the highest sense of the word. So really worth looking there. And I guess, again, why am I bringing it up? Because it's connected with Torah study, in that really to be able to do that, you have to combine it with Torah study, in my opinion. Now, the Maimonides doesn't exactly say that, but he says that a person has a certain hang-up, a person has certain dereliction in a certain direction, he should go to a sage to fix it. And the sage will direct them what to do and how to fix it. But yet he goes on to explain how to fix it he says you should be extreme in the other direction and then come back to the middle after a few years. That's what he says. So there's this idea of repetition. that repetition brings change. Very important concept. And this also explains the repetition in the prayers, which may annoy some people, or people could question, why are we repeating the same thing again and again? I mean, the answer, I think the simple answer is because you said it yesterday, but it's not the words that are changing, but you're changing. In other words, the person should feel more connected to those words and feel them deeper on a daily basis, or the truth of those words should be more true to them, and their faith should be strengthened as they're saying it. There's this expression that it's a Hasidic saying, which is a play on the words, that it says in Psalms, in the section that's said in the Hallel prayer, that really means that I trusted when I spoke that God would help me. But it's read Hasidically to mean I believed because I spoke. In other words, repeating words of faith helps strengthen a person's faith. If we repeat things, that God, God is watching over me. God is my healer. Blessed is the man who trusts in God, and so on and so forth. That saying these things helps strengthen those ideas in us. So, because, the question arises, how do you change your inside? I mean, if you don't feel it, most people say, look, I'm just not a religious person. Or I don't feel a lot of faith, so it's not for me. That's what most people think, but it can change, and a person can bring out what's, again, according to Jewish tradition, is inside of us, but has to be brought out. And clearly, this goes for all people, because isn't that what the Ben Noach laws? If there's 7 laws for everyone, then everyone has to have the ability. That must be something natural the person has. Okay. So that's why it's also important to study Torah every day. It's become ingrained in a person, and should become a part of who he is, a natural routine on a daily basis. And it's just the beginning of it's interesting in Hasidic writings. I think it's in other places in the oral law also. There's this idea that the sexual union begins in the brain. Let's put it that way. That the drops of semen somehow begin from the brain. But I don't think I think this is also in modern science, that there's neurological things. Obviously, a person's thinking. And so, one way to help a person protect themselves from falling into an excess of improper sexual behavior is to keep your thoughts on holy things, and God, and so on. In fact, I think there's one explanation of the ethics of the fathers, in which it says that if a person is busy with Torah and making a living, that keeps them away from sin, because your mind is busy with positive, serious things, your responsibilities. You're occupied with good and meaningful, productive things. Your brain is not empty to get up filled with things that it shouldn't be filled with. So the point is the importance of thinking and thought, and thinking, really positive, trying to keep the brain full of positive thoughts, and also our ability to think the things to have the will to be thinking according to, the 7 laws. In other words, if a thought comes of us into our mind, that is a jealous thought, for example, to reject that thought and instead replace it with a thought that fits into what the 7 laws would be more fitting, in terms of I'm happy with my lot, and I'm sure that person is getting, what he's getting that belongs to him, which God has given him, etc. Something that's more fitting in line with civilizing the world, and which jealousy is how would I say, is the I can't think of the right English word at the minute, but jealousy is one of the so what I'm saying basically is that jealousy is one of the spelling it wrong there, but jealousy is one of the most destructive forces that undermines. Spelled it wrong. Whoops. Okay, so that's the problem with writing things out. Is sometimes you get I meant is one of the most most. I don't know why I wrote it that way, but sorry. Yeah, what kind of a lawyer am I? I can't even spell. But anyway, but if you think about it, yeah, I mean, people, jealousy undermines commonality and cooperation between people. So it's very, very destructive. In English, they call it one of the 7 deadly sins, right? Yeah, it is a deadly sin. I wonder where they got this 7 deadly sin from take some of them from the 10 Commandments. It also brings us to another issue that comes up in regards to forbidden sexual prohibitions, and that is that when it comes to adultery, there is an overlap with theft. So that's an idea to think about. There's an overlap. It overlaps theft in that the person's taking the spouse of the other person. Again, halachically speaking, the fact of the matter is due to the natural process. Maybe some of it we don't understand why it's the case, but a man biblically is allowed to have more than one wife. Now, in Noahide community can institute a rule limiting that for societal reasons that a man should only have one wife. That is something that society can do, but biblically not required. Now, okay. You see in the Torah that it's one of the qualities that's praised about the children of Israel, even before they become or given the Torah, is being careful with sexual prohibitions. And Rashi comments a couple of weeks ago, I think it actually was last week, in regards to the son of the Israelite woman. Rashi comments that his father was, she was an Israelite and the father was Egyptian, right? I don't even know how to spell Egyptian, slips me. It's funny. In any event, so the Rashi comments that it was the only one. This was the only adulterous progeny that there was. No other woman was violated in an adulterous way besides her. And that he seems to say that's a point of telling us, that's one of the points of telling us about this. So, anyway. So that's an interesting point. And also in this week's portion, also, the fact that the tribes present their lineage also represents the fact that, there was no adultery that taking place there. And obviously, we can understand the importance of I could say this, the harm that adultery causes to undermine the civil society is that it hurts people's identities. And people, again, it's kind of like something people don't want to talk about because it can be very difficult sometimes. People may be personally unhappy in a marriage for various reasons, and people could change, the person could make a mistake and things like that. And so it's very hard people find it difficult to think of future generations when they themselves are not feeling happy in the life that they have day in and day out. Difficult situation. But the fact is that it's extremely harmful for children. I'm sure you all know this, in that the children's identity and the stability of their family really can affect them emotionally a tremendous amount. So, and it affects the society. Society lacks structure and lacks identity. So it really has to be thought of very carefully before a person, the person has to really think about those things, and that can help us overcome these weaknesses in those difficult situations. But again, it's also the way we look at, modern society looks at marriage and the way we should look at marriage, which is not only about love or about our convenience, but it is about building a family and being an important unit of a greater society. So it's not just about us. It does involve our whole community. Of course, it's both. I mean, it's something we pick, and that other person has to be fitting for us, of course. But at the same time, the choice is to transcend. We're both choosing the two people together are choosing to be a part of a mission to continue the society and its values, right? So even when things get rocky, people have to remember that. Okay. So another point about study, which we mentioned last time, but I want to reiterate, is the importance of studying the halachot, studying the laws and things pertaining that are practical, because the first thing a person has to do is has to know what to do. And also, as I was trying to say up until now, earlier in our lecture tonight, is that what a person does on a regular basis is really who they are or who they become. So it really affects us. And wisdom is not just about what we study, but what we do. Because the wisdom we study there's the knowledge, and then there's the knower. So there's the intellect. There's various things there are various parts of study. And so, in other words, we're studying something, but in the perception based on the person we are right now. And we change based on what we do. We are what we do to a great extent. Is to say that that's not who I am, I just do it, is false. In a certain way, that's one of the lessons of mitzvot, is that what we do changes us. One of the reasons for mitzvahs is to refine the person, and certainly to a great extent, that's true for Ben Noach particularly. And then again, they're rooted. The laws are rooted in rational reasons, and that's one of the biggest rational reasons for the commandments is to refine the person. So that's important. I mentioned there's a lot of now in the book I mentioned by Maimonides, he starts, the first part is the foundations of Torah, also related to every person, talking about belief in God. He goes off there in some of the early chapters to talk about the creation and his discusses the different spheres. Some of it seems a bit Aristotelian, but the idea of it is to show you how great and awesome creation is, and from that to come to be awed, inspired, and to love God. And that's something he says in one of the first laws. I think in chapter 1 he says that already, is that when a person contemplates about the fact that everything we see comes from that God and his wisdom empower that. It's all from him. That should overwhelm a person. I think I talked about this on our last lesson. And it's the question, why aren't we overwhelmed? Why is it that we know this and yet we're kind of like, okay, what else? What's for dinner? It just doesn't seem to get through to us, and why that's the case. And I think there's an interconnection here between keeping the commandments and this have a greater effect on us. The more we follow the commandments, and also I think, again, so a certain degree of self-sacrifice, again, refocusing, as I said last time, refocusing away from ourselves, but to others and the outside, and including that particular refocus on ourselves towards God. And then we open our eyes to what God is all about. Then we can really come to a much greater stronger bond or relationship with Him. So, so a lot of the laws, I think it's worth purchasing. You can actually get them in English, Hebrew, and English online. I'm trying to remember, it maybe the company, you can look it up, Mosnaim Publishers possibly, prints it. I think you can buy separate volumes. And this would be, I think, one of the first ones, which is the Book of Mada, which includes the fundamentals of Torah. It includes the laws of Torah study. It includes the laws of idolatry. It includes the laws of character, as I described. So you really have a lot of things that are directly related to the Noahide that are essential in this particular section, in this particular volume. So I think, so that's why I'm suggesting it. As we mentioned in the past, there are two ways, many times, there's two ways to view Noahide law. One is that they're really just, there's like a basic. Oh, thank you very much, Cheyenne, for that information. So evidently you can access it free. Thank you. Amazing. So you can get it free. Sefer Hamad is free out on Chabad.org. So you don't even have to pay for it. I mean, for Ben Noach, and you don't have the issue like I do that. Well, I can't do that on Shabbos, so I got to get the book. I'm old-fashioned. I like an old-fashioned book, really. Also, but yeah, you can get it for free. So there's no excuse, people. That's it. I can quiz you on it now. And I expect you all to be looking at it. All right, just kidding. So yeah. But also, as far as mystical teachings and other things for those who are interested, or whether it's mystical teachings or whether it's more scientific teachings, and I've spoken about it many times, the duties of the heart, which is more scientific, more rational in terms of meditating about God and building a person's relationship with God and so on. It's a really important book, I think, for the Noach who wants to grow. I was about to say that there's the baseline, Ben Noach, no adultery, no theft, no murder. And, that's an approach. So a lot of what I'm saying is advice. You don't have to, but the point is for people who want to grow as a Ben Noach and go beyond and far beyond baseline. Okay. All right. I've been thinking of a little bit of a different approach to the book in the past. I'm still following. I'm going to go back now and follow the book a little bit, but I don't know if I'm going to be reading out of the book as I was before. It's exhausting to read out of the book a little bit. For some reason, I find it tiring. And also, I don't know if it holds your attention as much. I'm not sure. But right now, we're in chapter 9, human sexuality, about page 222, 223. Actually, we were on page, we were a little before that. I think it was page 218, 219. I've been looking ahead, so I had the wrong place mark. So we're about 218, 219. We had previously discussed some technical halachic rules about what is technical sexual relations in terms of penetration or or genitalia contact, things like that. So that's an interesting paragraph in 218, which really, I mean, honestly, again, in terms of it's a fact that's holy, it's part of Torah, and it's important to know, obviously. But at the same time, it should be hopefully only something related to the courts, but not something a person should keep them far away from coming to that point. And certainly, as it continues in that paragraph in 218, that person needs to put up safeguards. And clearly, I mean, we see even in modern society how things move. Like originally, courting, was very formal, and in previous centuries, even maybe young women, maybe be chaperoned or something like that. Anyway, then people would be seen with a man, or man and woman together in open, not in private. Then, anyway, things continued to move, but as physical touch, physical contact becomes more permissible, particularly, obviously, passionate touching, hugging, kissing, and things like that. So that person is already released their passion, or have surrendered to it to a certain extent, understandably, because these things are very powerful, and it's very hard to then contain. So, we can talk about as far as where to get to a point where it's an actual sexual prohibition, but to allow to get to that point clearly is a very dangerous road. So maybe baseline it might be permitted, but it's problematic. There's this famous verse it's kind of there's this verse in the Torah. It's interesting how our sages of the Talmud and Mishnah were so open to talk about these sexual topics, although they spoke about it maybe in a little bit of a more modest fashion. But they speak about how Rivka, it says that she was a virgin and she was not intimate with anyone. So Rashi comes to explain the double language of the superfluous language, it seems like, of saying she was a virgin, she wasn't intimate sexually with anyone. Well, of course, I mean, if she's a virgin, then she wasn't. And he explains that the reason for that is that the virgin represents, in the regular fashion, but she also was not intimate with anyone in an irregular fashion. That's how our sages call it, whether the regular path of intimacy or the irregular path, which in modern parlance is, vaginally or sodomy, or anally, but they didn't use those terms. But I'm just saying it so the meaning of it in the future, we can refer to it in those terms as in the regular, normal path, normal approach, or the regular form of intercourse, or the irregular or abnormal, I guess. Maybe it would mean, or just the irregular form. So basically what Rashi tells us there is that the young women at that time, or when Rebecca's lifetime, is they used to permit themselves to engage with men non-vaginally in order to protect their virginity and obviously escape having children, the risk of having children, and when engaged in other type of sexual contacts. Why did I bring that up? Well, okay, we discussed last time that whether that's forbidden, and again, it's going to be forbidden, but won't be the actual literal prohibition. So according to baseline, there may be different opinions about that. Other opinions will say that even in a regular fashion, if it's with a forbidden relative or partner, then that also will be biblically forbidden and punishable by death penalty, even in a regular fashion. So different opinions about that. Let's see. I don't want to say something that isn't correct. Let me see this. Yeah, actually, there's a whole discussion of this on page 217. I'm not going to go over it. The different opinions about this, about whether only regular intercourse is what's absolutely forbidden or not. It's in discussion there. But obviously, none of this hair splitting will lead a person towards a sanctified lifestyle unless the person seeks to keep intimacy within marriage. So now, what is marriage for a Noahide? And this is also, though, an interesting thing, is that it could be living together with someone who's considered a Noahide marriage. There isn't any official ritual and just a commitment to stay together. And then if they break apart, then they're separate. But it has to be a commitment, just the two of them, and that they don't have other partners. And if that's the commitment, that's considered a Noahide marriage of sorts. So that's also interesting, and maybe is interesting in that many people have that view today, as they're not looking to get married, but to just live together. I guess the problem with that approach is that most people are living together because they're seeking not to have the full responsibility of marriage and want a way out. So I think there's certainly an issue there and a problem there in terms of what Hashem wants from the Noahide, because Hashem wants the Noahide to make a full commitment, and again, to stabilize society and to raise children. The person just staying for a year or something and then moving on, that's and those unions might create children, and mothers have children from multiple fathers. That doesn't create a stable society. And so although it may not be technically forbidden, but it's undermining the purpose of creating this sanctified and civilizing the world, which is the underpinning of all the 7 laws. Obviously, Noahide law understands that a person's sexual orientation is not committed in stone and doesn't define them as a person. So if you can go on now, we've now moved on to page 219. We've already discussed one of the important points on 218, 219 about adultery, and that it's also seen as a form of theft and a form of betrayal for someone to commit adultery. And we're moving on now to basically talk about homosexuality, really, in terms of the point of their person's feeling of certain tendencies towards type of sexuality. It's not a defining character of a person, although in a certain sense it may have a certain definition in terms of their spiritual struggle. Because the interesting point is it could be, it certainly is a fact that a person's sexual struggles are really part of their purpose of coming into the world. Those of you who study Rabbi Nachman's teachings, I've certainly come upon him discussing this point of the importance of doing battle with sexual urges and how basic that is to a person's purpose in the world and what they need to spiritually overcome. He also says something that as far as the negative Gentile, or I should say tendencies in the Gentile world, that they all stem from immorality. That's something he says. So I think that's very profound and obviously very important in terms of what the Noahide community needs to focus on, because if that's the source of all other ills, then that really has to be a focus of the war in terms of what we need to refine and correct, according to Rabbi Nachman. But I think obviously I don't have to. I say no more. I don't have to back up Rabbi Nachman because he doesn't need my. He doesn't need my support or anything like that. So, but I think it's also but I think it's based on other sources as well. I don't think it's something that Rabbi Nachman Breslov made, just innovated. I think it's based on other things. And as I said before, because it brings a person down to be dominated by their passions, and one passion brings to others, and the person is basically, it really becomes passion oriented. So the same way they're very passionate, they also could be passionate in their anger. And you do see this, that people who are very, given in sexually in a form of abandon, so to speak, they also, fall into other types of behaviors. Some of them may be related to violence, anger, where they allow themselves to go crazy, and things like that. And so there's a very powerful interconnection, because as a person becomes accustomed to surrendering to their passions and getting pleasure from that surrender, then they start surrendering to other things too. And that is a slope that can lead a person really to very low places. Okay. We come to the end of the session, and I've gone to a whole monologue. I haven't given anyone a chance to talk. So I'll give you another few minutes. Does anyone want to add or ask any questions about anything that I've said? I hope I didn't speak too quickly. The point about homosexuality needs to be picked up. But again, I think one of the points is that we really need to turn things around in life, and that sometimes our tendencies, quote unquote, are things that we need to do battle with. And they really may represent us and define us, but not in the way people think, not in terms that we should surrender to them, but they may represent the struggle that we came down into the world to struggle with and to overcome eventually. And it may take a very, very long time. But that might be the victory for which we came down into this world. So, questions, comments?